Sunday school leaders. I'm recording this from the upstate of South Carolina. I'm in the Clemson, South Carolina area where my son-in-law and daughter and now 2 grandsons live. We came out to welcome grandson number 2 into the world, little baby Charlie, who is now the younger sibling to Mr. Henry. So anyway, we're having a good time out here, but hey, it's almost Sunday, so it's time to look ahead, see what's going to happen this week. As you remember, we're in the unit entitled Victory. This week we're in session 2 called Victorious Hope out of Matthew chapter 8, verses 5 through 13. And the point of the lesson is that when we come to Jesus in faith, we find hope. I want you to imagine something, if you would. Imagine that you live in a country that's being occupied by another country. And one of the occupying soldiers comes to you and asks you for a favor. Now, he's not demanding it. He's just asking for a favor. Now, I would be tempted to tell him to get lost. But, that's not the way Jesus did things. Whether he was talking to the woman at the well, whether he was eating with tax collectors, or helping out the centurion in today's story, Jesus often crossed cultural barriers to reach and to minister and to share God's love with people. And it's a great example for us. So our story this week takes place in Capernaum. Now, Capernaum is a fishing city on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee. That Sea of Galilee is also known as the Sea of Tiberias, as well as Lake Gennesaret. And you think, why in the world would they have 3 different names for the same body of water? Well, it would depend on who was referencing that body of water. The Romans probably referred to it as the Sea of Tiberias, named after Tiberius, a Roman emperor. Now, we still do that today. I know in our area, in Jefferson County, in southeast Arkansas, we have what I grew up knowing as Lake Pine Bluff. In recent years, it's been renamed to Lake Sarensen. So some people still call it Lake Pine Bluff. Some people call it Lake Sarensen. So it's something that continues to go on today. Now, Capernaum is, as it's mentioned in the Bible, is never called a town or a village. It's always called a city. In this city, Jesus taught there in the synagogue, and it's there that the people were amazed at his teaching. It was here in Capernaum that Matthew used to work in that city's tax collector office. After being rejected in Nazareth, Jesus made Capernaum his headquarters for ministry. It's here in Capernaum that Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law. It's here in Capernaum that a man was lowered through the roof by his friends to be healed. It was on the shores of Capernaum where Peter and Andrew were casting their nets when Jesus came along and said, "Come, follow me." It's also James and John, another set of brothers, were mending their nets with their father when Jesus issued that same call to them. It's in this city that our story this week takes place, the healing of the centurion's servant. Just a little bit of background on a centurion. Now, we know that the word century means 100 years, so a centurion was a leader or a commander of 100 soldiers, and possibly as few as 80, but in the 80 to 100 range. So this was a man with authority. This was a commander. This was not a rookie in the army. This was a seasoned veteran. Now in Luke 7, verses 1 through 10, there's a parallel account of this story. And the Luke account gives us a little bit more detail. The Luke story tells us that this very centurion helped build the synagogue in Capernaum, the one I mentioned earlier, where Jesus taught. Now, a Roman servant was thought of as property. So for this centurion to be concerned about his property in such a way that he came to Jesus for healing for this man was really kind of unheard of. It was almost like when your car kind of starts getting rusty and it starts missing, you kind of trade it in and get another one. That was kind of the idea in that day with servants. You didn't care for them near as much as this guy is. Now, the word hope is not found in our scripture text this week, but it is in our lesson title, and it is in the point of the lesson. So a good question to ask is, what is hope? And what I mean by that is, what is biblical hope? Because it's not uncertainty. Like, I hope it rains so I don't have to wash the car. Okay, that's an uncertainty. I'm not sure if it's going to rain. I hope it doesn't. See, it's not that at all. John Piper has a great definition for hope. Biblical hope. It's confident expectation and desire for something good in the future. So it's not uncertainty at all. It's confidence. Now, there are a lot of word studies you can do in the Old Testament and the New Testament about hope, and it will confirm this. You can look in Hebrews chapter 6. It'll confirm this, that hope is not an uncertainty. It's not something that you wish for. That it's confidence, and it's confidence based on what? It's based on God's character and God's promises. Now, out of this lesson, one of the takeaways should be that one's race, one's background, one's national origin does not preclude one from being a child of God. You can't inherit faith. It's an individual decision. In fact, in verse 12, where he says the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into utter darkness, meaning that some of those folks who were born Jews that just expected, because I was born a Jew, I'm a child of God, they ain't going to cut it. It's an individual decision. And so that's something I think we need to relay to the class, that people who don't look like us, don't speak the same language, or from a different country, they have just as much right to be a child of God as we do. You know, I joked a little bit last week about that picture of white Jesus hanging in the hallway of my parents' house growing up. And unfortunately, that's the image too many of us white Americans have of Jesus, when he was actually a Middle Eastern guy. So anyway, all that to say, let's get across to our class that just like this Roman, he's a Roman, he's an occupier of Israel. He spoke a different language, or at least had another language that was his heart language that he spoke. Yet he came to Jesus and asked for healing for the servant. Now, I don't have a lot to share with you, just a couple of things I wanted to share with you about some background about the town and about centurions. Didn't have a lot of time this week with the new grandchild being born. In fact, I'm not even teaching Sunday school this week, so very thankful for Les Davis, who's going to step in for me. But I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts with you. Hope you have a great Sunday school class this week. Don't forget to pray for your guys. I'll see you next week.